This is from Seraphis, who wants to know, once Song of Ice and Fire is finished and that weight is lifted off your shoulders, what are you looking forward to the most? A new writing project, branching out into other media, or perhaps some well-deserved time off from writing?
You know, when I take time off for writing, it's like a couple weeks. I can't imagine ever retiring, you know, even as long as my mind is still working. I've always made up stories. I think I'll always make up stories. I have dozens of other stories unconnected with Ice and Fire that I want to tell. Which ones will I tell by the time Ice and Fire is finished? I have no idea. Whichever one I really want to tell at that date, and that's going to be, you know, 5, 7, 10 years in the future, and I'll be a different person by then. I'll probably have 100 ideas between now and then that I haven't even thought of now, so who knows?
Yeah.
But I will write something else. I will always continue, I think, to keep writing. It may be stuff that the Ice and Fire fans won't like, because it won't be Ice and Fire. It may be even like short stories. I began my career by writing a lot of short stories. I love the short story form. I don't write it much anymore. It doesn't pay very much, but it's still a great form. And you know, by the time I finish Ice and Fire, which, given the success of it, has left me pretty well off financially, so I don't think I'm going to have to worry about, oh my God, I took a month and I'm only going to get $1,000 for it. I'll be able to afford to do that and still write. So I might write a bunch of short stories, but I don't know.
Is it harder is the same level of difficulty short story versus like a long, you know, like a novel, in the sense that, you know, the short story is really kind of like a sketch. You have to convey the idea and kind of get in and get out. Is that more challenging in some aspects, or is it easier?
They're both hard in different ways. I mean, they're different skill sets. But, you know, you can write a short story in a white-hot heat of falling in love with the idea and the characters, and then it's over. You know, you spend a couple weeks on it. I mean, I've written short stories in as little as a week. Novels obviously take commitments of at least a year. It's always taken me at least a year to write a novel, and with Ice and Fire, you know, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So it's a long thing.
That's weird, because you would change. You personally would change in a period of time that you're writing something. Yes. So do you get 2 or 3 years in, like 300 pages in, and then you're like, I hate this now, or like you're different, or you don't believe some of the things you wrote anymore?
But that is an issue. I mean, years ago, I was when I lived in Chicago, I was in a writing group with Gene Wolfe, brilliant writer. And Gene, in our writers group, we were seeing the early drafts of what began as a novella and ultimately became Gene's famous 4-book trilogy, The Shadow of the Torturer, and its sequels, Shadow of Torturer, Chlora Conciliator, you know, Citadel, The Autarch, etc. Gene was a full-time magazine editor for Plant Engineering magazine. That's how he supported himself and his family. He wrote weekends, he wrote nights, but the crucial part was he didn't have to pay his bills with his money from writing. So he wrote that entire series before anyone saw any of it. He wrote all 4 books.
Oh, wow.
In first draft, and then when he finished them, by the time he finished book 4, he knew exactly where it was going, and he could go back and revise book 1 with book 4 already in mind, and, you know, put in some foreshadowing to things that would happen in book 3 that he hadn't been thinking of when he wrote book 1, take out some things that turned out to be dead ends that never led to anywhere or whatever, and produce that. And that's the ideal way to write a long series, is to write the entire thing and then submit it only when it's done. But of course, I would have starved to death if I'd done that thing, because my writing is my only source of income. And you know, if since I started this in '91 and I'm still working on it all these years later, I would have had no income for 25 years here. So that would have been difficult for me.
Sure.
But artistically, that's the ideal way to go about it.
Are there things that you look back with the original Game of Thrones and you're like, shit, I wish I hadn't done that?
Yeah, there are.
Were you able to influence maybe a change in that when it came to the series? Like, it's like, you know what, there's a thing that I would have liked to do. Do you mind doing that for the series?
Well, I've thrown a few things like that at David and Dan from time to time. But I hesitate to mess with it too much because, it is what it is. I published the books. It's too late to change. I know some writers go back and they revise their earlier books. Arthur C. Clarke published his first novel, Against the Fall of Night, and then he went back later and rewrote it as The City and the Stars. Both interesting books. It's interesting to look at them and see the differences. I actually prefer the earlier book, however.
Yeah.
I like Against the Fall of Night better than The City and the Stars. So sometimes your first instinct is your right instinct.
You hear that, George Lucas?
Yeah.
Oh, he loves to listen to the podcast.
Sure,
yeah.
He's really going to take that to heart.
No, he didn't hear it. No matter how many times people
George!
Joshua Quayle wants to know, essentially his question is, you become so accustomed to character death, which can be hard for your fan, like to watch, like it's basically someone that they get to know that then all of a sudden dies. And so emotionally, this guy's question sort of revolves around how he has emotional difficulty now being attached to characters because he knows they might die. So his has shifted to the sources of power behind the players. And was that by design or incidental, or what's your overall take on killing a character?
Well, my overall take is more people should do it, I guess. I mean, that's weird that you can't get attached to characters because you know you must die. I mean, does he carry that through into real life and not get attached to the people around him because they might die?
Probably.
They will die. All of them will die. I hate to tell you guys this, but all of you are going to die.
Not us! Comic-Con 2013!
Let's just jump out the window, guys, together!
We are the champions, my friend.
That is true. Somewhere right now at Comic-Con 2013, every one of those people, those 150,000 people, is going to die. There will come a time when nobody living will remember Comic-Con 2013.
That's not possible, the times we're having.
So we still form, that's part of the wonder of the human race is life and death, and we form these attachments, and we lose people, and we find new people, and we live these lives in, defiance of the darkness that looms over us all. And winter is coming for every one of us.
You should write all that down. That was good. You should write that shit down.
I know, stop snapping. Probably not going to work.
Do you get excited?
I
There must be some kind of a weird thrill in knowing that you've hooked someone into a character and they're like, oh, just you wait.
Actually, it's hard for me to kill the characters. I mourn them almost as I do real people. But even some of the villains sometimes, as nasty as they may be, and they perform an important plot function. And when you lose one, it's hard to replace them sometimes. But I'm a reader before I'm a writer, and they say you write the stories that you want to read, and I think there's an element of truth to that. And as a reader and as someone who goes to a lot of movies and television shows, read comic books, I like things to be unpredictable. I hate these things where, you read the first chapter, you know exactly where the book is going to go, it's completely predictable. And I want the suspense of knowing that my characters are risking things and so forth.
So my final question is about how do you push past the wall? When you sit down and
Wall of ice?
not the wall of ice. When you sit down and like I need to write today, I have to get through today, but your brain is just sort of on lockdown. Do you step away, or are you able to mash through it? And how do you do that?
Some days I'm able to mash through it, some days I'm not. That's one of the things. I mean, I work pretty much every day. The only time that I take off full days are when I'm traveling, and that's a different sort of work, like I'm doing here. Or, during NFL season when I'm watching my football games on Sunday, I take all Sunday off. But other than that, I'm working pretty much 7 days a week, but I'm not always necessarily writing. Some days I do hit the wall and I'll answer email. I mean, I'm presently about 3,000 emails behind, and, I may come a day where the writing is just not coming very well, so, okay, I'll answer 100 emails today. And
got a lot of emails from George today. Oh, he must not be writing. What's a good
I
word
hire
count?
minions like Ty and his associates here who are trying to take some of the emails and some of the associated things off my plate, but things keep piling up on my plate.
What's a good word count for you in a day where you feel like, oh, I got a good, or is it I hit a good story point, or is there like a metric of a word count that you like to hit?
If I'm perfectly happy if I'm doing like 4 or 5 pages a day. That's a great day for me. I've had a day, occasional days where I've written 20 pages. That's probably the record I've ever had in my entire life, but it's only happened like twice.
Yeah.
And it tends to happen toward the end of a book, like on something like Fever Dream, Armageddon, Rag, where the end was in sight. I was on the last chapters, and suddenly I'm going downhill, and it's all falling into place, and I'm building. I haven't reached that stage on Ice and Fire yet here. There's still so much more to go. So,